The will revealed a secret debt that unraveled a decade of lies. I thought my brother was stealing from me, but my family's secret was far darker than I could have imagined. I set out for revenge, only to discover I was the villain in my own story. This is how I learned the brutal truth about my father's past and the man who sacrificed everything to hide it. I guess it started at my mother's will reading. I am a city planner, 52 years old. My whole world is built on straight lines and clear details. My brother David has never been like that at all. He is 3 years younger than me and always a mess. The lawyer's office was a silent, peaceful place. It smelled like old paper and expensive furniture polish. This was meant to be a simple final meeting. My mother had passed away just 2 weeks ago. She was a good and simple woman. She had planned everything with perfect care, or so I had thought before this day. The lawyer spoke in a calm, practiced voice. He was detailing the assets, the house, the savings. Then he mentioned an outstanding obligation, a debt that had been attached to the estate. It was not a small amount of money. The number on the page made my stomach turn. He said it was a family debt. It was owed to a man named Marcus Thorne. The name was one I had not heard in years. It was connected to my father's failed business, a business I thought was long gone. David sat across from me and would not meet my eyes. He was focused on the dark grain of the tabletop. The silence from my brother was a very new thing. It felt like a stone dropping into a deep, dark well. It was the first true sign that something was very wrong here, so I went back to my everyday life. It felt like I was holding my breath constantly. I am a city planner, a person who loves structure. I returned to my job, where the lines on the page are always straight. I tried to convince myself that the debt was just a misunderstanding. I called my brother David, but he was always vague. He said he was handling it. He insisted everything was fine. I wanted to believe him completely. I needed to believe that our family was still solid. David and his wife Sarah came over for dinner. Their 2 kids were there too. They all looked like a perfect, happy family unit. Sarah was laughing a little too loudly. David talked about their upcoming vacation. He seemed so calm and untroubled by everything. It was all a little too perfect. I started noticing small, strange details. David had a new, expensive watch that day. He took a couple of hurried phone calls. He would leave the room to answer them quietly. He spoke in a whisper I could not hear. Later, I went into the den to get a book I had left. David's laptop was still open on his desk. The screen was showing a spreadsheet. It was full of numbers and names. I saw the name Marcus Thorne clearly on one line. It was right next to a series of large payments. My brother's name was also on the document. I felt my breath catch in my throat. It was not a misunderstanding after all. It was all a very real thing. My perfect life was starting to feel very fragile, so I had to confront him about it. I went to David's house with the information. My mind was racing with a kind of sick certainty. I saw him sitting on the couch watching some game. He looked so comfortable, so completely at ease. I sat down and told him what I had found. I told him I saw his computer screen. I said I saw the name Marcus Thorne. I watched his face change from calm to completely guarded. His eyes went flat like a lizard's eyes. He told me I was overreacting. He said it was just a simple business transaction. I asked him why he hadn't told me about it. I asked him why he had been hiding these payments. He stood up and started to walk around the living room. He said it was his business, not mine. He said I was being too nosy. I told him it became my business at the lawyer's office. I said the debt was connected to our mother's will. I said the money was coming out of our inheritance. He stopped pacing and just stood still. He said it was more complicated than that. He said he was just protecting the family name. I asked him what he meant by that. He said our father was a part of it. He said Dad's old business was a front. He said Dad had gotten involved with some very bad people. He said this debt was a form of protection money. He said he had been secretly paying it for a decade. He said he had been doing it all on his own. He said our mother was aware of everything. He said she swore him to silence about it. He said she helped him manage the payments. He revealed that he had used up up his own inheritance share. He said he had started dipping into my half of the money. He had taken almost a fifth of my portion already. He was looking at me with a kind of desperate calm. He said we had to keep this a complete secret. He said the wrong people would come for us. He said there was no other choice. I realized I had been living a complete lie my whole life. My father was not a good businessman. My mother was not just an innocent woman. My brother was not just a lazy dreamer. He was the keeper of a terrible secret. He had already betrayed my trust and my money. I just sat there in a stunned silence. I felt the floor fall out from under me. I had to decide what to do next. So after all of that, I went home and just sat there. I felt numb and stupid. I replayed every conversation with my brother in my head. I thought about all the times he would just shrug off my questions. He would just say that I was worrying too much. He would tell me that everything was fine and under control. I felt the guilt start to wash over me. I felt like I should have known all along. I should have seen the signs earlier. I should have been a better brother. I reached out to my friend Tom for advice. He is an old friend from my college days. I told him a very edited version of the story. I left out the part about the debt and Marcus Thorne. I just said my brother had financial troubles. I told Tom my brother was asking for money. Tom gave me very simple, unhelpful advice. He just told me not to get involved. He said he had seen this happen to other people. He said family and money were a terrible mix. His silence on the more complex details was deafening. I tried talking to my wife about it too. I told her David was acting very strange. I told her he seemed worried about money. She just said I was being a typical older brother. She said I was too hard on him. She said he would figure it all out eventually. Everyone I talked to was gaslighting me in a way. They were all telling me that I was the problem. They were telling me I was seeing things that were not there. I felt a deep sense of isolation building up. I had this big, crushing secret weighing me down. My brother had been lying to me for years. He was already stealing my money, and now no one believed me at all. It was the moment I realized I was completely on my own. I was the only person who knew the full truth. The silence from everyone else was just as painful as David's betrayal. I couldn't just sit there feeling sorry for myself. I knew the truth now, and that was something. My orderly mind needed to process this and find more proof. I couldn't just take his word for it. I started looking for old family records. I wanted to find some trace of my father's business. I found old tax documents in a box in the attic. They showed a lot of strange, unexplained transactions. It was also confusing and vague. They were not what a normal city planner's books would look like. It felt like something was being intentionally hidden from view. The numbers were too big, the dates were too frequent. I also started to watch my brother from a distance. I drove by his house at odd hours of the day. I saw a fancy new sedan parked in his driveway. It was not the kind of car he could afford with his job. The payments on that car must be huge. I saw him meet with a man in a dark suit at a coffee shop. The man had a very serious face and spoke with his hands a lot. They were looking over documents. My brother looked nervous and kept checking his watch. It was not a casual or friendly meeting at all. He had no idea I was watching him. I took a few pictures with my phone. The man looked a lot like the photograph I found in my father's old files. It was a picture of Marcus Thorne. I also noticed that David's wife, Sarah, was a lot less happy lately. She didn't have her usual overly bright smile on her face. Her eyes looked tired and red, like she had been crying. She was also making a lot of excuses. She told my wife that David was always working late. She said he was always on his phone. The small cracks from before were becoming big fissures now. I could not deny the truth anymore. I had all the pieces now, and it was time to put them together. I could not live with the lies anymore. The first thing I did was make a copy of everything I had found. I took the old tax documents and the picture of Marcus Thorne. I printed out the photos I had taken of my brother's meeting. I put everything in a big manila envelope. I also wrote down all the things my brother had told me. I wrote about the family debt and our father's business. I wrote about how he had used our mother's money. I wrote that he was now stealing from my inheritance. I felt my anger turn into a cold, hard resolve. I drove to David's house and went inside. He was sitting at the kitchen table, looking at his laptop. He glanced up at me, and his face immediately went tight. He knew this was not a normal visit. I told him we were going to talk now and he was going to tell me everything. He tried to get out of it to say he was busy. I slid the big envelope across the table to him. I told him he could either tell me the truth or I would just go to the police. I said the documents and the pictures showed everything. He looked down at the envelope and just froze. He tried to say it was all a big misunderstanding. He said I was taking it all the wrong way. I told him to stop lying to me. He finally broke down, and it was a terrible thing to watch. He started crying, and he just told me everything. He said he had been living in fear for 10 years. He said the debt was not for money, but for a terrible favor our father had accepted. He said our father helped Marcus Thorne's family business escape a legal issue. He said the debt was in the form of regular payoffs to keep Marcus from talking. He said Marcus and his friends were very dangerous people. He said they had threatened his family. He said he had been paying them with his half of the inheritance. He said it was not enough, and they had threatened his children. He said he started to use my money to save his family. He said he never wanted to lie to me. I looked at my brother's crying face and felt nothing at all. He had betrayed my trust and our family. He had put his kids' safety before my financial future. It was not a misunderstanding. It was a conscious choice. I just took the envelope back and stood up. I said I was no longer helping him with this. I said he had to deal with it on his own now. I just left him there sitting at the table. I drove away from David's house with a cold silence in my car. The world I had known just moments ago was gone. The simple truths I believed were all lies. I called my wife and told her I would be late. I told her I had to take care of something important. I did not mention David's name or the debt. I went to a quiet diner and sat in a booth. I stared at my reflection in the dark window glass. I felt a kind of emptiness I had never felt before. I called my brother David the next morning. His wife Sarah answered the phone. Her voice was thin and very fragile. She said David was sleeping, that he was very ill. I knew she was covering for him. I told her I knew the truth. I told her about the debt and what David had been doing. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. She then started to cry, and I could hear her deep sobs. She said she was so tired of all the secrets. She said she had been trying to make sense of his behavior. She said she was relieved to finally know the truth. She said she did not know about the debt. She had just thought he was having an affair. She said he had been distant and cold for months. She told me he had started to pawn things. She said he had even taken her jewelry. She said he would get a call and then rush out of the house. He would return hours later looking defeated and sad. She said their family was a complete wreck now. She said she wanted to leave him. I felt no satisfaction in all this. I just felt a deep, profound sadness. She hung up the phone after a few more minutes. I went to my brother's house later that day. I handed him a note with a lawyer's name on it. He looked at the note and then at me. His face was full of hurt and disbelief. He had no more secrets left. He was just a defeated man. I stopped looking for peace and started to look for answers. I realized that my anger was a kind of strength. I had to stop being the victim of my brother's lies. My first step was to take action, and it needed to be cold and morally gray. I wanted to take back the power that he had taken from me. I called my old friend Tom again, and this time I told him everything. I told him about the debt, about Marcus Thorne, and about my father's lies. I told him David had been stealing my money for months. I told him my brother was putting his family's safety before my own financial stability. Tom listened to everything without saying a single word. His silence was completely different this time. It was a listening silence, not a judging one. He said he had an idea that might help me. He said he had a friend in law enforcement. He told me that his friend was a very good detective. He said the detective worked with old cases. He said his friend would know what to do about Marcus Thorne. He said his friend could help me get my money back. I told him I wanted to destroy my brother's perfect world. I wanted him to feel the same pain he had caused me. Tom said revenge was not a good motivator. I just said I did not care about that right now. I was just acting on pure and simple rage. I didn't want to understand what he did anymore. I just wanted to make him pay for it. I hung up the phone after we finished talking. I was no longer a city planner. I was now a man on a mission, a man who was no longer controlled by his family, a man who was finally in control. I called Tom again the next morning. He gave me the number of his friend, the detective. I called him and told him the entire story from beginning to end. I told him everything my brother had said. I told him about the debt and Marcus Thorne and our father's lies. The detective listened to everything very carefully. He told me it was a serious matter. He He said Marcus Thorne was a powerful man with a lot of connections. He said Marcus was connected to organized crime. The detective told me to meet him that afternoon. He said he would bring some files on Marcus. I went to a coffee shop and waited for him. He was a tall man with a serious face and tired eyes. He put a file folder down on the table. Inside were documents about Marcus Thorne. The detective said Marcus had been involved with my father's business decades ago. He said my father owed him a lot of money. He said the debt was not a simple payment. It was a fee for Marcus not to expose my father's role in a very serious crime, a crime that involved money laundering and fraud. My father's business was just a front for everything. I was horrified and numb at the same time. The detective said my brother had been paying the debt for 10 years. He said David had been using his own money to do it. He said David's payments were not enough now. He said Marcus wanted a lot more money. He said Marcus knew about our inheritance. He said he wanted me to start paying too. He said Marcus was an extremely dangerous man. He said he would hurt my family. The detective said my brother had put me in a terrible situation. He said David had involved me without my consent. I told him I did not care. I said I just wanted this whole thing to end. I said I wanted to expose Marcus. The detective looked at me with a kind of pity. He told me that was a very bad idea. He told me that this could lead to violence. He told me that my life could be in danger. I told him I had already lost my whole family. My father was a criminal, my mother was a liar, and my brother was a thief. I told him I had nothing left to lose anymore. I left the detective's office and called the lawyer's office again. My heart felt like a cold, hard stone in my chest. I asked the receptionist for the phone number of Marcus Thorne. I said it was a family matter. I was no longer interested in trying to get my money back. I was no longer interested in trying to help my family. I was just done with all of it. The receptionist gave me the number, and I wrote it down. My hand was shaking as I typed it into my phone. I pressed the call button and listened to it ring. A deep voice answered on the other end. I told him my name and said I was the other brother. I said I was aware of the debt. I said I was also aware of everything my father had done. He was silent on the phone for a long time. Then he laughed a short, brutal laugh. He said he had been waiting for my call. He said he knew my brother was at the end of his rope. He said it was very expensive to keep his mouth shut. I told him I had a proposition for him. I said I would give him what he wanted, but there was a catch. I told him I would pay off the debt, but I wanted it all done in public. I told him I wanted it all to be out in the open. I said I wanted our family's whole secret to be revealed. He was silent on the phone again. He then told me that I was a crazy man. He said I had no idea what I was doing. He said this could ruin my reputation and my career. I told him I did not care. I told him I had no reputation left. I told him I had no family left. I told him I had only the truth. I said I would expose everything about him. I said I would talk to the police and the media. I told him I would show everyone what my father had done. I told him I would show everyone what my brother had done. He gave me an address for a public meeting. He said he would bring the final documents for me to sign. He said it would be our last transaction. I told him I would be there. I hung up the phone. It was over now. I showed up at the address Marcus Thorne had given me. It was not a restaurant or a diner. It was a lawyer's office, but not mine. It was a small and unassuming office building. I walked in, and Marcus Thorne was waiting for me. He was sitting at a big wooden table. He looked just like the picture, only older and with a tired, calm face. He had a stack of papers in front of him. I sat down and told him to explain everything. He told me our father's business was a front for a money laundering operation. He said my father owed him a great deal of money. He said the debt was a matter of principle. He told me it was not a debt for protection. It was a payment for my father's life. He told me he was going to kill my father for cheating him, but my brother David went to him and begged for my father's life. He offered to pay off the debt for years. He told Marcus that my father was just a scared man. He said he would take full responsibility. My brother, the dreamer, had been living a nightmare. He had been protecting our father and me for 10 years. He never told me because he knew I would not understand. He had been paying the debt with his own money first. He only started using my inheritance when he had nothing left. He said he was just trying to protect our family. I realized I had been completely wrong about everything. My brother was not a liar or a thief. He was a good man who had been living a secret life. He was a hero in his own way. I had been so wrong about everything. I had ruined my brother's marriage and his life. My anger was so misplaced. It was my father who had been the liar. My mother had been the accomplice. I signed the papers and paid off the debt. I then went home and called my wife. I told her I would not be coming home for a while. I drove to the nearest motel and got a room for the night. I just lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling. The truth was just a cold, heavy weight. It was not a victory at all. It was just an ending. If you enjoyed this video, support it with a like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with your thoughts. Your reaction helps me create new stories.